A lot of you think that Christ died for this many sins, but what if I commit this many? And you go around all the time trying to keep your figures up, trying to balance the bad with the good that you do. You go around all the time going, you know, I know that God will put up with this addiction for so long, but gee, what if I've gone past the point where he can forgive me anymore? Let me tell you what, there is no such point. God knew you at your worst before he ever sent Christ to take away your sins. God longs to be merciful to you. You don't have to hide your sins from God. If you confess your sins, God will hide your sins from himself. And he's going to do a lot better job of hiding them than you will, because he's going to erase them. We can't fool God. We don't have to fool God. This is the good news. God knows who we are. We're so self-deluded, and we think that God is as dumb as we are, because we have trouble loving ourselves because we know what we're really like. God knows even more what we're like than we know, and God loves us still because God is more able to love than we are. You can't make yourself right by your own efforts. Our need for rightness is not met in our striving. Our need for rightness is met in the reality of what Jesus accomplished 2,000 years ago on the cross. I often say that I became a Christian because I encountered the love of God and his people. But you know what? Beyond that, I only can be a Christian because of what Jesus did 2,000 years ago. Had Jesus not chosen to take away my sins, no choice that I would ever make would make any difference. I'm not a Christian because I'm a better person or because I've made a more appropriate response to the grace of God than anybody else. I am a Christian because the grace of God is greater than any response I could possibly make. You don't have to try to fool him. People say, well, then what do we do? And I kind of go, you know what? Forgive each other and forgive ourselves. If we live in the awareness that we are made right because God has in reality taken away our sins, let's live also in the awareness that he has taken away our neighbor's sins as well, and be willing to forgive. One of the great tragedies of life, of many people that I've talked to, is that there were people that they really loved, and these people really did do a bad thing. These people really transgressed in some major way. And so they went, wow, I can't stand to be around you anymore. Your transgressions have come between you and me. I can't be with you. I can't forgive you. I can't. And then you live several years away from this person, and all of a sudden you go back and you begin to remember someone that you really loved, someone that you were really close to. And you kind of go, wow, the truth is I missed them. I know they were rats, but I really do miss them. Because Christ has forgiven you, you have the power in Christ to forgive others. What I would challenge you to do if you're going to do something is to forgive as you've been forgiven. God has made things right between you and him. That score has been settled. Now, in the freedom that we have because of the forgiveness that we have experienced, let's begin to make things right between us and other people. Maybe your parents did scar you. Forgive them. Maybe your kids really are brats. Forgive them. Maybe you live with a spouse who's been abusive. Maybe you live with a spouse who's been a louse. Maybe you live with a spouse who's totally self-absorbed, who's totally selfish. Forgiveness isn't the same thing as tolerance, folks. Don't confuse those two things. But forgive. Have a heart that is willing to be forgiving. Carrying around that anger is not going to make things right. we, by our own efforts, are trying to manipulate people into doing the good stuff, we're not going to succeed at it. Forgiveness will give us the freedom to do what is good and to be right. Does that make sense to you guys? I think that our time is up on this session. Thank you all very much for listening. You've done a good job of that. Any questions?
No such point that God will not forgive you. I've struggled with some spots in the Bible where it says, I think it's Psalms or Proverbs that says, there's a point when God dealt with you and, you didn't deal with it. And then beyond that point, when you come to Him, He'll laugh at your derision. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a point where you're just unable to ask Him to forgive you? I've always kind of just said, the only point that God will not forgive you is when you yourself are unable to ask Him.
Okay, did y'all hear his question? That in Proverbs, God says that I've called you and you wouldn't come, and so what's going to happen is someday you're going to look for me, you won't be able to find me, and I will laugh. Which is, He's God, He can do it. I kind of believe this. I don't really believe it as much as I suspect it. In the New Testament version of that we find in Romans, where Paul talks about because they worship the created things rather than the Creator, therefore God turned them over to depravity. You all know what I'm talking about there? And because they were depraved, then he lists all these things that they became guilty of. And the religious right take that and they run with it and they say, well, now this is why we know that homosexuals are so awful. Well, the religious right never points out that he talks about backbiters, and if there's a bunch of backbiters, you'd find them in the church. I think this. I think that God does not turn us over to depravity to punish us just so He can get even with us. I think He punishes us because He loves us, the same way that a parent punishes a child because he loves the child. I think that God kind of goes, at some point, if you won't be drawn to me because of my goodness, I will allow you to be driven to me because you're repulsed by your own badness. And I think that that's the way depravity works, is that at some point we get so sick of ourselves, we're so astonished with our wickedness that we run to God and say, please save me, because I can't. Does that make sense? Okay, add that to your thought process, if you will. I don't think that God turns us over to depravity. I don't think that God allows us to suffer the consequences of our sin because He hates us. I think He allows us to do that so that we will eventually come to Him. I think that the goal of everything in our life is to draw us to God. She asked if that was the same thing as the unpardonable sin. The unpardonable sin, I think, is that sin where we reject the testimony of the Holy Spirit as to who Jesus Christ was. If we don't have any hope apart from Him. Yes? Okay, yes. Okay, she said, could I elaborate on the idea that forgiveness is not the same as tolerance? Tolerance is that thing that says there is no such thing as right and wrong, so we just have to put up with each other. Forgiveness says, this really is wrong, and I really won't hold you to account. If, in the scenario with the boy and his parents, if his parents would have said, okay, here is the deal. The deal is you can't go out next Friday because you violated your curfew. Excuse me. That is the justice in the situation. We choose to waive that justice. We choose to act in mercy rather than injustice. I think that would be a good example. Now, as far as tolerating someone that is constantly bad to us, I really don't know the answer to this question. And I've often thought, when does God forgive us? Well, He forgives us when we ask to be forgiven. And I think that a lot of times what we try to do, and we call it forgiveness, but it's not really forgiveness, is we continue to have a kind attitude towards someone who is being unfair or unkind, which I think we have to have. We have to continue to have a kind attitude toward them. But I kind of go, part of forgiveness is recognition of sin. And without that recognition of sin, forgiveness is a meaningless thing. If someone doesn't know that they're wrong, they can't possibly imagine that they would need to be forgiven. So I think that when Paul talks about speaking the truth in love, Paul sometimes sounds so severe. You know, with the guy in Corinth that was committing some outrageous sin. He was living with his mother-in-law or something like this in a living with. And Paul says, kick him out of the church. But he doesn't say kick him out of the church because you guys are really good people and he's a really bad guy. He doesn't say kick him out of the church because we really want to get even with him for doing this horrible thing. What he says is, if he doesn't repent, kick him out of fellowship so that he will come back. Once again, the goal was not merely to get some kind of satisfaction out of beating the guy up. The goal was to have him drawn back into the church. Boy, I don't know the specifics, and I would hate to even address them. What I would most recommend is that you take this, what we're talking about here in big generalities, maybe talk to your elders and find out how specifically to apply these basic principles to that situation, to whatever situation. Sorry, I can't be more help.
No question on that kind of impersonal sin. In Matthew, it says that God will forgive every sin of humanity, blasphemy sin, even against Jesus Christ. Except unless it's against the Spirit. How do you commit something against the Spirit and not against Jesus? And he'll forgive against Jesus and not the Spirit.
You've asked a really heavy theological question. I'm going to have to send you over to Notre Dame to talk to the religion majors, because her question was, once again, specifically about sin against the Holy Spirit, blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. When Jesus is talking to them, they had just said that Jesus was casting out demons they were accusing Jesus of being possessed of a demon. I think if, once again, the witness of the Spirit was that Jesus Christ was the Son of God, the anointed one of God, and that when they called him a demon, when they said that he was possessed by demons, they were rejecting the only hope they had of forgiveness. And so they couldn't be forgiven. Yes?
Could you talk more about forgiving another person when forgiveness hasn't been asked yet? Or how...
Boy, that's a hard thing. I'm not really sure how that all works out. I know that God has a forgiving spirit, and that before I even knew to ask forgiveness, God was already actively wanting to forgive me. And I think that's we have to have that spirit and that attitude of, so that when we confront people, you see, this is the difference. When someone has confronted me who didn't really love me about something that they thought was a sin in my life, it was real easy to blow them off. It was real easy for me to go, that's no big deal, you're just hung up about this. When someone confronts me not out of some feeling of pride on their part or some kind of personal pietistic kind of thing on their part, when someone really comes to me and says, man, here's something that is really destroying you, or here's something that is really destroying our relationship, or here's something blah, 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 then you're a lot more able to hear it. I think that when Jesus talks about taking the mote out of our eye before we try to take the splinter out of another guy's eye, and a lot of people say, well, what that means is that until we get our life morally completely together, we're never allowed to confront anybody else about their moral problems. I don't think that's what Christ was talking about there, because he just finished talking about judgmentalism and not judging each other. I think what the mote in our eye is the smug satisfaction we get out of pointing everybody else's faults out to them. Does that make sense? I think Christ was saying the real mote in your eye is the fact that you don't love the people that you criticize. The real mote is that you have no compassion for these people. The real mote is that you are a smug, self-righteous hypocrite. And once you've taken care of that, you're going to be more able to get the splinter out of the other guy's eye. Why? Because you're going to be able to do it very gently. You're going to be able to see very exactly how to go about the process without hurting the person that you're working with. So I think getting rid of a judgmental spirit in ourselves is a big part of being able to be forgiving. Once we realize that we ourselves are in violation and that we ourselves are living under the grace of God, it becomes a lot easier to be forgiving toward other people. That's, I think, Jim? Is lunch here? And I'm not sure the logistics of how we're going to do this, but I think we're all going to break bread together now. My favorite part of any meeting. And I'll let Jim give you the... Sorry. Thank you.
Okay, lunch is going to be obviously real confusing, but it does. You guys think I'm going to juggle? Huh? No, I can juggle, not 5. I can juggle 3. Huh? Okay. Let's trying to think of a couple really cool. Oh, don't film this. I'm just messing around for right now. Let's see. Oh, okay. Can someone verbatim quote the key statement for the weekend without looking to check first? Come and receive your free gift. In fact, pick one. Okay. Let's see. Another interesting question. Anybody know who wrote We're Leading Lives of Quiet Desperation? No. Come on up, you're a winner. A juggle? The banana is going to be kind of rough. I wish I had an apple because I can actually... Oh, okay. Because I can... I mean, I know you think but I can juggle. Usually, yeah, I can eat the apple partly, but... Oh, well, then we have another question. What is Jeopardy? Okay. Golly, I'm like totally blank. Anybody think of a good question? Who was? Anybody know who Susan was? Does everybody know what that reference is? Really? What was her last name? You know what? I don't even know Susan's last name. But anybody know who Susan was? The reference is to one of Rich's songs. Huh? No, that's Reed. It's okay. Basic gender difference there. That's a tough one. Susan was just some ex chick. For him. Huh? No, wasn't the one he was going to marry. But there's a song about her. He has a song about her called No. That song is not about Susan. What Susan said is not about Susan. The river is about Susan. It was. But no, the song about the girl he's going to marry. Where is he? Because I would ask him. Gay, what is it? Is that what it's called?
Is that the one?
Both feet on the ground? Yeah, the song Hold On to My Hand. Is it Place to Stand?
Place to Stand, yeah.
Yeah. That's about the girl that he was going to marry. But he wasn't, and there's a part in there where he says her name, and I think he didn't put that, they didn't do that on the album, right? Because they had to kind of make it sound like it was about God or something holding her. I don't know. Christians aren't allowed to write love songs, I guess. No, she never even did because she didn't even come to Wichita. Or she did once. I think that was enough. Here, I'll tell you what. Does anybody, and you can't, if you do, you can't say this out. Anybody know my real name? You know? Oh, you do know. Why? How do you know?
Because I was down in Cincinnati or two.
That's true. Anybody want oranges? You want one? Yeah, sure. Anybody else? You? Okay. Enough foolishness. Popular guy in the media right now. Ooh. Probably like this about now. Is this anybody's glove? There's one. It is. Yes. Oh yeah, right. Yeah, I have this friend who's. Come on in, guys. You are. Okay. What's my real name? I can't. There's times I've tried to say, like in public, and he wouldn't tell. Anybody that values their life. Oh, I will clear something up. Beaker has nothing to do with the Muppets that I know of. So we're in Columbia. We've got a little time to kill. I might as well tell you. We're in Columbia, and we go down with Compassion, and they take this other person. She's total ditz. And that's a nice way to put it, actually. And anyway, she, I think, had no social skills whatsoever. And she had this really awful... You know what's really bizarre is I keep... I'll look over to a way, and I'll see myself in one of those things. And then I look up and I go, all I can see is the side of my profile. I want to be able to see myself looking at myself, and I can't. It's one of those. It doesn't happen. I can't make that work. Isn't that a weird thing? Okay, so how many of you all have walked by service merchandise where they have the video cameras, and you're always trying to see yourself and you can't do it? Oh, okay. Columbia. So she talked like this the whole time. She said, "So did you get your name Beaker because you have a really big nose?" That was when ditz first crossed my mind. As far as I know, it doesn't have anything to do. It could have something to do with my nose profile, but. Some guy in college, my freshman year, called me that, and he was very loud, and it so happened that I ended up playing basketball, and the guy that was the announcer was in that circle that heard that name, and people started calling me that, and so he announced me as that name the first time I ever got to play, and so everyone then at the college thought that was my name, and it just kind of stuck from there. So The rest is history, as they say. Could I get an 8 by 10 of that? You know, really, it's not my nose is really that big. It's just my nostrils are huge. How's that for making an excuse? We were hiking with this. Okay. So we were hiking with this guy, and you know how last session we were talking about need to be right, and the thing that we'll do was settle for making excuses. And his foot odor was like out of this world, and we'd been hiking on the Appalachian Trail, and one night we were in this little shelter and everything, and we're going, Doug, man, you gotta do something about that. And he said, my feet, it's not my feet that stink, it's my socks. Like they produce some odor apart from his feet or something. Okay, wow. Let's get a grip here. I hope you have been able to see in your, maybe in your own life, some of the needs that you have, to come to grips with that and to be able to honestly look at it. I hope, secondly, that you're not embarrassed that you have needs, that you believe that that's the way God made us all. I think it's funny that people think about going to church, that by going you say, you know, you're saying that you're somebody good or you're somebody that has it together, because I think that by going to church, by even setting foot in the door, we're all saying, you know what, I don't have it together. That's why I'm coming here. We're going to talk in this session about our need for love, which I think the need for purpose may kind of be one of those things that's hidden, that comes out every once in a while, maybe when you're quiet. And don't be afraid to be quiet. Maybe challenge yourself to go a week without turning on any radio, stereo, or television. Or maybe just start at a day and just, I think our own thoughts are so scary, you know? I think sometimes we think that we never are able to hear God's voice, and maybe it's because He can't yell louder than your stereo. Maybe there's lots of stuff He'd like to say, and because we're unwilling to be quiet and let go, we don't get to hear Him. I think in those quiet moments, maybe is when we maybe start to think about our need for purpose. I think our need for rightness probably is maybe not so much one that's buried beneath like our need for purpose, but it's one that we want to overlook a lot. That we may tend to just want to code over and go, I'm fine. I'm not really wrong about anything, at least nothing that I want to admit. I think you'll see as we look at our need for love that it's probably of the three that are going to talk about is most evident. And the way I'd like to start this is we'll go back to having y'all stand up, because what I'd like to do is for you to give, and for those of you all that have been to this retreat, if you know our definition, if you even would remember that, don't include that yet. Let's leave that as like a surprise. Okay? So what I'd like for you to do is think for a moment of how you would define love. And I think defining, I kind of put a lot of weight in that. In semantics, that words really do have meaning. And what is happening in our society is words are being stripped of their meaning every day. Either by overusage, where they become common, or by people trying to define them in different ways. If you think about love even, and just of all the definitions that we're constantly given about it through weird things. I don't know if y'all remember the commercial, mothers who love their children serve them Kool-Aid. So like all the mothers who serve Coca-Cola don't love their children. There's defining going on all the time. And what I would like to do is for us to be able to collectively look at what we think love is. And then maybe through the studies that Rich and I have done in putting this retreat together, through looking at the Bible, through looking at some various authors, especially Brennan Manning, G.K. Chesterton, and C.S. Lewis. Lewis especially, from his book, The Four Loves, come up with a pretty solid definition of what we think love is. For your definition that you're going to share with us, no synonyms, please. Needs to be a complete statement. Love is, and whatever, fill in the blank. Okay? So, anybody got something that they think is a definition? Please stand and...
Love is a decision to act in a way that's kind, forgiving, and affirming.
Okay. Love is a decision to act in a way that is kind, forgiving, and affirming. Oh, and no 1 Corinthians 13 either. Okay? Can't do that one. Somebody else. Yes, please stand. And
Unconditional acceptance. Unconditional acceptance.
like a mother?
Unconditional acceptance.
Didn't you say something after that, though, too?
Yeah, like a mother.
Like a mother. Okay. Unconditional acceptance like a mother's. Okay? Yes, please stand.
Sacrificing for others as much as we want to sacrifice ourselves for us.
Okay. Are you guys hearing this better with people? Okay. Love is sacrificing as much for others as we would like for them to sacrifice for us. Somebody in the back, I think, was, yes, please.
Love is the unselfish concern of one individual for the life and the growth of another.
Cool. I was thinking if I could repeat that, and I can't. So say that again louder.
Love is the unselfish concern of one individual for the life and the growth of another individual.
Okay. Yeah.
In a relationship, love is not only a feeling,
In a relationship, love is not only a feeling, but
but
a commitment. Maybe two others? Two more? Yes.
Commitment of oneself to providing the greatest good for the other person, no matter what the cost to yourself.
Okay. One more. We'll do one more if there is one more. Yes.
caring of one person to and from another person.
Okay. The caring of one person to and for another person. Okay. These are great definitions. The one that I'd like to think about for a moment is the one that she said, in a relationship, it's not just a feeling, it's, what was that? It's a commitment. Because I think a lot of us somewhere have a belief that love has to do with feelings a bit, even though we may want to say that it doesn't. We probably think that it does. Agreed? Would you agree with that? that in some way, aren't we kind of taught that love is feeling kind of good about someone? A whole bunch. So how do most relationships between, let's look at the romantic kind of love for a second. How does that happen? I'll draw you the scenario of what I think. Guy sees girl. Thinks girl doesn't know, but she does. Girl pretends not to notice guy seeing girl. There's some attraction there. One of the two makes a first move, initiates a conversation. Guy appears intelligent. Girl seems unrejecting. Guy and girl decide to go out for a date. They decide they like each other. Kind of enjoyable being with them. They like the same foods. Their parents vote the same ways. They like the same cars. They have kind of the same friends, the same interests. They like each other a whole lot. They feel really good about the other person, right? Weeks pass. Months pass. No arguments. Just a little tiff over whether or not chocolate chip ice cream cookies. What? Chocolate chip ice cream is better than strawberry ice cream. Resolve that little tiff by saying, you can have your opinion and I'll have mine. Continue on, like each other, like each other, like each other. One day, guy and girl grow up to be 19 or 20, and they drop the big L word, which is immediately responded with, I love you too. They do that for a few years. He gives her a pre-promise engagement ring. Another little tiff about the size of the wedding, and finally they get married. Now, I'm not going to say that it's totally based on feelings, but I believe that that's the way a lot of relationships are. I think what happens is we have a whole bunch of really good feelings, and they're put into a bank. And people get married. It's kind of like a savings account. Something happens over here that's bad, and it takes one out of this good feeling bank and moves in here to the bad memory bank. And what has happened in 50% of the marriages in our nation is this bad memory bank has become full and overflowing, and the good feeling bank has become empty, and we've said, I just need to go my separate ways. It's not going to work anymore. You know what? I've fallen out of love. I've fallen out of love. What's that? So we get some great definitions, but I think practically feelings are connected. I hope I'm not being accusatory, okay? But I want us to even consider that as a possibility, especially for those of you that aren't married yet. Now, we're talking about one type of love, which is just the romantic love in this instance. But we all know that there's other types of love, right? The love that a man has for a woman is really different than the love that a daughter has for her mother or father. There is a familial type of love that's different than the romantic. And those two types of love are really a little different than the way Jonathan and David would have felt about one another. I think that you can love things and not in a bad way. I remember this girl, and we'll call her Sue. And Sue said to me, this was like when I was probably in junior high, she said, you know, I love you, but I don't have to like you, and I don't. I thanked Sue, gave her a Kleenex to fix her bloody nose, and went home. And I always thought that was such a weird, for me that was a really weird thing, the idea of liking someone and not loving them, or loving someone and not liking them. I was always really confused about that. In fact, I was confused about love for a long, long time. Until I was 22 years old, I never told anyone, like consciously, that I loved them, because I finally believed that I didn't love anyone. So that's that time from being a child saying I love you to my parents or to whomever, until the time I was 22, never said those words. Because I didn't really understand what love was. I didn't understand how my dad could yell at me, rebuke me, correct me, and then turn around and tell me he loved me. And I couldn't understand how he wanted me to be able to say I loved him when at that moment I thought he was a blooming idiot. And as I read the Bible, I would read 1 Corinthians 13. Love is patient, love is kind. And I would hear some pastor, some youth teacher say, insert your name in there. And I would insert my name and I would say, Beaker is patient. Beaker is kind. And I would stop about there and go, no, that's not true. And I was just all confused. I read some more, looked at the scripture some more. And I remember reading the story of the Good Samaritan and it having a profound effect on me. Because I think liking is that thing that has to do with feelings. And I think love really doesn't. I think liking is when things are going well, you just kind of connect with some people. Isn't that true? But you just have a connection with some people and other people you kind of don't. You may be neutral about them. They may be irritating. Kind of like the chick in Colombia. I didn't like her. Why do you think I love her? I read the story of the Good Samaritan, and I knew that Jews and Samaritans didn't like each other. And yet, the Samaritan is the one who was said actually loved the Jew. Took care of him, wrapped his wounds. It comes in the guise of, who's my neighbor? But it's really talking about, because you're to love your neighbor. Well, who's your neighbor, okay? So I was thinking, wow, that's really very interesting. So maybe it really is possible to love someone and not like them. And I started to pull feelings away from the idea of love. And what we came up with was a definition for love, which I think makes a lot of sense. And some of your definitions are very close to that. We're not saying that this is the only definition. It's a good definition. If any of those that were said you like, write them down. The definition that we'd like to use is this. Love is wanting what is best for someone or something and doing something about it. It's wanting what is best and then doing something about it. Lots of you are writing. Y'all done? Okay. So, I realized that I might love my pickup truck. And if I did that, I would change the oil every 2,500 miles. I'd give it a bath once in a while. I'd make sure it had gas. Special occasions, I'd take it to the wash-o-matic, get the engine degreaser, spray it on there, let it soap up, wash it off. I would change the tires, check the brakes. I wanted what was best for my truck, and I did something about it. I realized that my relationship with my father, that I wanted what was best for him, which was to have a son who honored him, for one thing. And then I did something about it. I told him, you know what? Till I die, till you die, you're always going to be the dad. I'm always going to be the son. We might disagree about things, but I'm going to do my best not to provoke you. Whether or not you provoke me, whether or not you irritate me, whether or not I think you're a blooming idiot, whether or not any of those things, my job is to be a son that honors his parents, period. I said that when I was 24 years old. In fact, it was in Indiana that I said it, I believe in Fort Wayne in a Chinese restaurant. And our relationship has been different from that point on. When I love being able to talk with y'all when we're at our breaks. I kind of enjoy people. And I love playing like little games in my own mind. I try imagining who you are, where you're from, what your life has been like. Please don't take offense at that, because I've imagined some wild things about you people. I love looking at people in the eyes. You're not Cyclops. In the eyes. Can somebody get a close up on one eye? Oh, you don't even have are the cameras on? Oh, they are. Here's one eye for you, bud. Because I think the eyes tell a tremendous story. When you begin to look at people's faces and like really focus in, it's funny. Some people like have no problem looking back at you. Some people have to look away. We've been doing retreats for a few years. We've been doing concerts for a long time. Sometimes doing concerts, they have spotlights, which I mostly wanted on me. But it's really weird, because when you have a spotlight on you, you can't see out. And sometimes I miss that reaching out and being able to look in someone's eye and find out where they are, what they're like. But the thing that I really believe that I see most often when I look into people's eyes is I see people who desperately want to be loved. That's what I see. And I could tell you story after story after story of conversations that I've had with people after concerts, after retreats, at Wichita State University, some of my next door neighbors, of hurt and heartache and loneliness and a tremendous longing for someone, somewhere to love them. And I don't see people as being weak for saying, I need to be loved. I see people as being human. What's so disheartening, what hurts a lot, I think, are the stories that you hear of people who want to be loved, who need to be loved, but settle for a bunch of garbage. See, we're talking about what you want and what you need. But when we try and have our needs met outside of faith, what we do is we end up getting way less than what it is that we want in the first place. Not only is it less, most of the time it's hurtful, it's damaging, and it's very far removed from what it was that we wanted. I think that we settle for popularity. And I don't mean, when I say popularity, I'm not talking about being famous, the most popular person on campus, the most popular guy at work. When I say popularity, I'm talking about just a fitting in, a belonging. And what happens when you settle for popularity is it means basically that you'll do anything. Because popularity demands that you have the right stuff if you think about it. We could take any group of people and say what it takes to be in that group is having the right stuff. If you think about at school, you want to be in the smart crowd, it just takes the right stuff, which are grades. And I know people, I remember high school well. 2 girls got caught cheating. And the reason that they were cheating, they were smart. They didn't study for their test, and they could not fathom getting a low grade on their test and possibly not being in the honor society any longer. And so they cheated. Nerds like to be popular among themselves. You just got to have the right stuff. If you're a jock, you've got to be athletic. You just have to have the right stuff. If you want to, is there anything such as a prep? Is the prep thing even a thing anymore? Is that out? It could be the right clothes, the right hairdo. I think we walk around sometimes so afraid that we're going to commit some fashion faux pas. Yeah, the fashion police are going to come give us a ticket. You've broken the rules, buddy. You wore orange and red on the same day. The right stuff. And what happens is basically means you can buy it, you can make it, you can earn it. It all depends on you to have the right stuff at the right time. What huge pressure. Tremendous amount of pressure. Y'all know what I'm talking about when I say popularity now? Do you? Do you know, what's your name? Yeah. Becky, do you know what I'm talking about? Do you? I remember, how old are you? 15? Are you in 9th, 10th grade? 9th grade. It was 7th grade when I quit eating in the cafeteria because I knew I didn't have the right stuff. I just didn't fit in any of the groups. And man, I wanted to be loved. I wanted my friends to love me. I wanted that desperately. And I remember one day going in the 7th grade, going through the line. It was early in the year, and with those stupid little plastic trays, got my milk sitting on there, and really awful looking food. Giving my money to Martha, and turning around and going, I said words that were not real kind, but going, I have no idea where I'm going to sit. I felt totally alone. I think at that time I was still a fairly nice kid. And most of the other kids in junior high really weren't. I don't mean that in a bragging sort of way. And I just didn't really fit. I was very small. I happened to play sports. I didn't really fit with the jock crowd because I wasn't a great jock. I was just kind of a tag-along. I was halfway smart, but I wasn't brilliant. And I couldn't get in the really smart kid crowd. Even the nerds wouldn't have me because I was a jock and halfway smart. The band people thought I was really weird. Man, I turned around with that tray. I think that was the first time I had ever had like the thought of, I need dial or something. I remember my armpits sweating. And I remember it dripping down I remember sweat dripping down my neck. And I was just scared to death. And I did that for 2 more days, and I said, that's it. I will not put myself through this anymore. And so I just got out of there and never ate in that cafeteria again. I wanted to be loved, and in my head I was going, popularity would even be a nice thing, just to be in with the group. The second thing that I think that we settle for is, I think we settle for manipulation. And y'all know the story of Mary and Martha? It's kind of a tragic story when you think about it. Think about, I always see it, Mary's cooking all day. Martha's cooking all day. And she's been cleaning all day the day before. I mean, not just cleaning, but power cleaning. I mean, she's done the baseboards, you know. She's been scrubbing because Jesus is coming to town. Gosh, that sounds like Santa Claus is coming to town. Okay. But she's preparing. She is working hard. She's making the best meal that she can possibly make. She's straightened the closets just in case he happens to look in. She's done everything she possibly can. And Jesus shows up. And Mary, she's just kind of Mary. I think Mary was blonde. I'm kidding. It's a vicious stereotype that we all know is true. But Jesus shows up and Mary's just hanging out. She didn't do anything yesterday to help with the house. Jesus gets there and there's Mary sitting down by his feet. Think what was going inside Martha's head. I bet she was calling her sister some names. Martha's trying to finish up dinner. She set the table. She really thought, maybe Mary will help a little bit. She hadn't. I'm sure, they're probably like in the living room. And Martha's like in and out of the kitchen, dining room area. And she's like walking by, trying to get Mary's attention. Get in here. Mary's just sitting there. Martha's beside herself, and finally she just goes in and says, Jesus, would you please tell Mary to help me out? I think in a real kind of off-the-wall way, Martha was just trying to manipulate Jesus. I think that with all her preparations, with all of her meal making, home cleaning, and everything, that she was trying to make herself necessary to Christ. Because I think that she kept going, would you like some more tea? Is there anything I can get you? A pillow? Stool for your feet? She was trying to manipulate Christ. into caring about her. And I think oftentimes we try and manipulate other people, that we think if we are necessary to them, that if there's some small task or large task that we can do for them, then we'll really be in a great position. We think we might be loved, but actually all we end up with is manipulation. There was a girl named Stephanie when I was in the 9th grade. She had the hots for me. Go figure that one out. And I didn't respond to her. She started out, she would bring me like a Coke every day. And then she started like bringing candy or cookies. Then Stephanie, she would write me a note, just, these friendly notes all the time. Then in English class, it was during the 4th bell, I always wanted to skip out, and so Stephanie said, hey, you know what, I'll take notes for you. And the professor, I think he was like about 300 years old. His hair was like kind of had a green tint to it. And I'm not exaggerating, that's really true. And his name was Wally Ekbreath. I don't think he ever noticed that I was gone. So she took notes for me. Well, then I never responded. And she finally said, hey, you know what? Because I would show up on test days, which were once a week. And she was like a good student. She said, I'll take your test for you. And I said, well, sure. Because she got about equal grades as me. And that year finished, I never really thought anything of it. And then we started putting this retreat together, and I was thinking about the idea of someone wanting to be necessary to somebody else, of manipulating them. And I realized that's what Stephanie had been doing. She really wanted me to love her, but instead she was just manipulating. She thought that if she was necessary, if I needed her, that would be the same thing. And basically all she ended up with was being used. The third thing that we settle for is physical intimacy, which I think we often just kind of have had so many images, been told so many times, have heard over and over in music. It's been flashed on every billboard, on the TV, at movies, that sex and love are pretty much one and the same. And I believe that it's funny because you guys were like, this is really kind of odd, but you guys were dead quiet just a second ago. And as soon as I said physical intimacy and sex, there was just this uncomfortable stir. You guys just were kind of moving around going, wow, now it could really get interesting depending on what he says. And I'm not real big on going deep into the whole thing. I think God's really smart. And for good reason, he tells us to be abstinent if we're unmarried. So my big encouragement, my words to you are this. If you want to talk about it later, we can. For those of you in our viewing audience, we can't talk about this later. But I don't believe that sex and love are one and the same. What I would like to encourage you with is whether you have or haven't in the past and you're unmarried, today's a new day. And there's stuff in your life that you'll have probably to deal with. There's consequences. I think that's why God says don't in the first place, because he doesn't want us to have to deal with that stuff that goes along with that. And you know what? You may do great for a week, and the next week you mess up again. You know what? The day after that's a new day again. As much as you can, and relying on the grace of God where you can't. I plead with you to remain pure until you're married. And I want you to know it's okay to be pure. You know, I think there's weird things that go on. I mean, I was 29. I was 29 before I lost my virginity to my wife. And I had a reason I was saying that. Now it sounds like I'm just bragging. And it totally has like, oh, I know exactly what I was saying. I thought I was weird and not really a man and not a guy, because that was the feedback that I got. And I guess I was just wanting to say to you guys that aren't married, don't listen to that crap. Because every girl you're with is somebody's sister and somebody's daughter. And I'd have a feeling like no matter how warped you were, you wouldn't want somebody doing that to your sister or to your daughter. Okay? Is that enough on that subject? All right. When you get married, go to town. Have lots of kids. Have lots of fun. Just go for it. And I am talking so slow. What is my deal? I have no idea. Part of the deal is I can't remember what the first thing that we settle for is, and I feel really embarrassed by that, and Rich is going to help me out, I think, because I've like... Popularity. No, I already did that. I left one out, and I can't remember what it was. Attention. Thank you. You've been... Yeah, great. You know this better than I do. The fourth thing that I think that we settle for is attention. And basically, that is just getting people to notice that we're alive. We want to be loved, but we'll take attention. And the way that this works is if you sit and just watch group interplay, watch anything, it's really wild the way people act, and you start going, why do they do what they're doing? And a lot of it, I think, when we talk about needs, is they really need to be loved, but they've learned that attention kind of can slip in there and it doesn't fulfill the need, but take the place of it for a while. You think about somebody that's really loud, and you go, why is that person loud? And you probably go, you know what? They're selling for attention. There's probably somebody that always has to crack a joke. The most serious, intimate time, somebody has to crack a joke. And I would venture to say that it's not so much that the guy is just overflowing with humor as it is he was wanting some attention. You think about little children, and I think that they really want to be loved, but they learn that scream or that cry or that tantrum or that you fill in the blank will get attention. And they begin settling for that. So that's all the junk we settle for. And I use the word stuff and junk and try and say them as despicably as possible, because I think it is junk. We try so hard to meet our own need for love, and we fail so miserably, and yet we return. We're like dogs going back to our own vomit. We just go to it over and over and over, and we walk around and have faces and eyes that really are crying out, I want to be loved. Somebody please love me. So do I got some big fancy answer for you? Nope. I don't have one guarantee that if you would say, from today on, I'm not going to settle for stuff that's less. From today on, I will not strive, I will not make a huge effort to to fulfill my need for love. I have no guarantee that you're going to meet somebody, that there are going to be people in your life who are going to love you. But I can make this one guarantee, that as long as you make your own efforts, you're just going to be that much farther away from ever having the possibility of being loved. And I believe this. I believe that God loves us more than we would ever know or suspect. And in your quiet moments when you don't have your stereo or your TV turned on, allow yourself to think of the sacrifice that he made, first of all, in even taking on the form of a man. And then the sacrifice that he made in going to the cross. Because it is in God, it is God himself who defines love. You see, 1 John says, God is love. And we're not ever going to know what love is if we don't really know God. And I think that's why our world's a bit screwed up in the matter. They reject God. They don't want to know God for who he is, but who they would like to define him as. And so they're never going to have any idea, any square idea, on how to define what love really is. If you got nothing else from this retreat, I think you would be changed people if you could believe with even an ounce of belief how much God loves you, just the way you are. A bundle of confusion, barrels and barrels of contradictions, sometimes failing, sometimes succeeding. God loves you now, how you are. He's not waiting for you to get better before he'll decide to love you. He's not waiting for you to give up some habit. He's not waiting for you to have a Bible study every day, 3 days a week. He's not waiting for you to pray, 15 minutes a day for a month without missing a day. We place so many expectations on ourselves. We think, man, I'm never, ever going to be good enough. And you know what? Probably won't. And God loves us. Please, please believe that. Stop trying to earn God's love. Because it's a gift. He's given it to us. It's free. We're not going to be able to get enough points eventually to go, hey, God, now you owe me. We talk a whole lot about our own needs. And I would have a feeling that in a retreat like this, if I was in your place, I would be sitting and thinking, if we were getting through it all, I would be sitting and thinking, okay, I've got a need for purpose. Yeah, I can see myself here. I have a need for being right. And I can see myself here. Definitely, I've got a need for love, and I can see what I'm doing here. I believe that when you begin to have faith that God will meet your needs, it frees you to begin to look at other people and to try and meet their needs. We talk about making a difference in the world. I think a lot of us just finally get irritated and fed up with the way things are. We go, wow, 12 men turned the world upside down, and we've got more churches than ever before. And this place is a mess. And I probably say it at every retreat we've ever done. I would imagine if one of you would start to believe how much God loves you and to live that the world would be different. I challenge you to look out, to take your eyes off of yourself for a while. And to look into the faces of the people that you work with and that you go to school with. And you struggle to see the needs that they have. Probably won't be much of a struggle. Learn how to be really quick to listen, quite a bit slower to speak. Start to believe that the people of this earth are all together. Try and get out of the you and me, the we and them mode. Begin reaching out. Want what's really best for other people and then do something about it. You will make a difference, maybe unparalleled in the course of human history. Try not to be judgmental. Try not to look at people and condemn them. Realize how much God has loved you and is loving you. And I think you will be free to love other people. I love the story of the two people praying. And about the one who's been forgiven much. I think when you realize how much you've been forgiven, it just makes it so much easier to be forgiving. And I think when you know how much you are loved by God, it makes it that much easier to truly love. So get out there and love people. That's cut, Hal. That's all that we really have to say for today. We're not really going to say anything tomorrow. So the speaking part of the retreat is over. Does anybody have the time? 2:10. 2:10. Hey, Jim.
Let's take a 15-minute break, and then at 2:30 you can answer questions again. Ask questions and answers for a while.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you guys want to take a break and then do some question and answer kind of stuff? Oh, yeah. Would that be better to do like maybe some question and answer now, and then just that way we just have the one bigger break so y'all can do kind of whatever you want to do until what time?
Concert's 7:30. We'll open the doors at 7.
Okay.
So
So Rich, do you want to come up so that they can do some question and answer kind of stuff? Is that cool with is that cool to do that? thank you guys so much for being a part of this. And when is it going to be aired? That will be coming into your living room next week. I don't know. Nobody knows. We don't know. We don't know.
Okay, and probably if you have something you need to go do, or you want to like get together among yourselves and talk, or go eat, or do whatever you want to do, this is going to be pretty loose from now until about 7:30. So if you have some questions, go ahead and fire away, and we'll try to answer what we can. Questions? Comments? Rebuttals? Yes. I don't know if we write. You know, it's so unclear because we, you know, up until he got married, we lived together and we traveled together, and because we get along so well, most of the time when we had goof off time, we goofed off together, and writing isn't. You know, it's funny. There are times when you sit down with a pen and paper and you go, okay, now I'm going to write. But a lot of times what you end up writing is just out of conversations that we've had and stuff like that. So one thing that has happened writing-wise is a lot of times Beaker will come up with the original musical idea, and then I'll take it and make it right. Flip it around and twist it and turn it, and then we'll, you know, come up with the music, and then we just kind of talk. And so by the time it's all done, we don't really know who did what.
I would like to say something about that. I'm not musical, which is I was going to say it's like kind of a misconception, but anybody that knows music and then has heard me play has probably figured that out fairly easily. I've been playing the guitar for about 4.5 years. Didn't really know much about music, and so Rich really, I mean, when it's like a co-write thing, the part that I do is pretty small. I don't know that I would really know how to create a whole song. When we write the lyric part, it's usually, you know, I may throw in a line, words, whatever. So if you said, hey, sit down and write a song, well, not quite that I wouldn't say that minimal, but
there's just a lot that goes into a song that doesn't really have to do with rhyme schemes and you know, linear feet. So I would say in that sense, Beaker has quite a bit to do with it. In terms of working out the actual mechanics, a lot of times I do that. Yes.
Why did you cut your hair? And you notice the difference in the way people react to it?
Yes, I can get through customs much faster now. Beaker still gets held up because he still looks like a drug smuggler. If you travel by plane, I'm going to start wearing shirts and ties when we travel on a plane, because if you do that, you just get treated a lot better. And I think it's fine to be an individual and to have your own style and everything, but it's not practical. I cut my hair because we were in Atlanta, it was really hot, and I just got tired of having long hair. Yeah. I don't know how long it was. My first time, I don't think you can even see it because you can only see my hair from here up. But on my second album, it was real short because I had gone to Thailand and we were told to get our hair cut really short because of lice and stuff. And when I took the pictures, it still hadn't grown out. Then, you know, I mean, I grow it out and then I cut it off. I grow it out and then I cut it off. Hair's not a big deal to me.
It is to me because I've only have a few left.
Yes.
How often do you travel with a band or put a band together?
We don't travel very often. We are going to be traveling this summer for a month or so with the Ragamuffins. And but most of the time it's just me and Beaker, just because, man, it would cost so much to fly everybody in to do a concert. No one could afford to go to it. And then we'd lose a lot of money. Well, Lee was real involved in the last album that we did. Like, I think he did almost all the keyboard stuff on the last album. He didn't do the piano, but there's if you listen to it, it's kind of amazing how much accordion there is on the album, and he's doing all the accordion stuff and the B3 stuff and all that. So we did a lot of work there. He's not going to be able to go out with us this summer because Nikki is going to have a baby, right? Sometime during tour. So they're not going to be touring with us. They're still performing around Kansas, and they still live down the street from Beaker. Yes?
Two questions. Are you going to be in Detroit and going back?
Gay, are we going to be in Detroit?
We were just in Detroit.
Yeah, we were just there. What? With the whole band? No. I don't think Billy's going to be on tour with us, no. The liturgy, yeah. Uh-huh. Like all the fancy guitar stuff is Billy. Yes.
You still do that cup thing on screen doors?
No, because me and Beaker, between the two of us, we couldn't make it very interesting. We spent our whole time trying to pick him up. We'll probably do that this summer with the Ragamuffins.
And it's really hard to get 4-part harmony with one person.
Yes.
What's Beaker's name?
Beaker.
How long have you guys known each other? Did you know each other when you were little kids, or?
Well, when he was a little kid, I wasn't even in existence. You know what I mean? I can tell that story.
Okay.
When I was, I think 13 or 14, Rich was in a group called Zion, and I got invited to. It was a church that my parents belonged to, but I hated going to church, and somebody roped me into going to this weekend thing where Zion, who did weekend retreats and concerts and stuff, he was there, and with that group, and that was like the first times we ever ran into each other. And I remember him like specifically because we had this, it was like an all-nighter thing, and at 14 years old, I ate like a lot of sugar, I think, and though I had a small body, I had strong lungs, and we were staying all night at this place, and it was these people's house, and me and two other friends were just being up and rowdy kind of all night. And I remember very specifically in the darkness this figure standing straight up, sleeping bag like up to his thing, yelling for the three idiots to please shut up so he could get some sleep. So that was our first meeting, and then it was a memorable one. And then when I was 18, I became a youth pastor and started going to a thing called Christ in Youth, which was a conference in Adrian. They have conferences kind of around the country, but in Adrian, Michigan. And it so happened that I grew up in Cincinnati, which is where Rich went to some of his, like, I think 15 out of his 30 years of college experience were spent in Cincinnati. Working on his bachelor's was spent in Cincinnati, and we really ended up getting to know each other at that conference a bit. And I happened to go to the same college where he went. He did a couple concerts there. We continued to kind of get to know each other. I ended up moving from Cincinnati to Indiana, and was a youth pastor there, which was 20 minutes away from where he grew up. And one day he like showed up on my porch. I'd given him my phone number, and I lived in a town. It was called New Lisbon, Indiana. There's a KFC 76 truck stop there, and like 150 people, and that's about it. And he showed up, and when I got done with that, with being a youth pastor, I had no job or nothing, and so he asked me if I wanted to go on tour in 1988, if I wanted to like carry equipment and stuff for him. So that was how we ended up really getting to know each other, was that way.
He was more fun than my parents. Yes.
Who's your favorite musician?
Mine or his?
Rich.
Good answer, good answer.
I'll tell you the real one in a minute.
I think I'm kind of one of those 70s kinds of guys. I really like Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, Cat Stevens. I really like Bruce Cockburn. I like his older stuff more than his new stuff, although I like his new stuff.
But who's your favorite?
My favorite? Well, it depends on what genre. I really like Aaron Copland. I really like the Chieftains. I really, really like the soundtrack to Geronimo. And I go through different phases. You know, like 1 month I'm really into this, and then, you know, for the next month I'm really into that. But the long and short of it is I really don't listen to music very much. So there you go. I really like Paul Simon too.
Oh, you stole mine. I was going to say.
You stole mine too.
I did? Well, I think I love the soundtrack to The Mission. That is absolutely fabulous soundtrack. And musician-wise, I do like Maria McKee, who was.
He likes you too.
I like you too.
Thanks.
I'd like you. There's a group called Hot House Flowers, who I really like, but my all-time favorite album is that album that I was telling you about, Shelter by Lone Justice. It's easier for me to pick a favorite album, I think, than person.
Oh yeah, because I really like the Beatles too, but I don't know that they're my favorites. I mean, it would just really be hard to say who my favorite is. It's kind of like, what's your favorite food? Depends on what I'm hungry for. Depends on what I just got done eating.
Which is a really cool thing if you guys like do that thing of turning off your music. If you do that for a while, you'll find out that you'll want to hear something specifically, and you won't want to hear just noise. It's kind of like when I don't know if y'all have fasted before, but it's a good thing. Fasting is really very healthy. And not only is it healthy, not only is it good spiritually, but you also find that your body will it'll tell you kind of what it needs, and you will have a hunger for probably something very specific. So it's just kind of, I think a lot of times we eat food and we have no taste for anything, we just want food. And music is the same way. And when you cut that stuff out, then you go, wow, I know exactly what it is I want to listen to. I want to listen to this album by this artist, and nothing else is going to do the trick. So.
Yeah, like a good example is, like after I got done listening to the Geronimo soundtrack several times over, and I tend to do that. I tend to, and I limit myself to only listening to it once every day. Because if I didn't, I would just put it on and I would just sit in. But I have a tendency to listen. I mean, I have a tendency to not do anything while I'm listening. It's just like hanging on every note. And I was just kind of going, oh, I want to hear something really exciting, but I can't think of anything I really want to hear, so I wasn't listening to anything. And then I went to a symphony concert and heard Barber's Adagio for strings, and so, like, for the last week, I've been playing that, over and over and over, just going and listen to one piece and then go to school, and then I come in from school and listen to it once more, and then I go out and do my, whatever business I had to do, and then before I go to bed, I listen to it one more time. So right now, if you ask me, I would probably say not my favorite group or musician, but my favorite song right now. It's not really a song, but Adagio for Strings by Barber. It's really, kind of wonderful. Yes?
Tell us your personal testimony.
My personal testimony?
I was raised in the church. My mom was a Christian all along and went to church and everything. My dad, I don't know if he would have considered himself a Christian. He didn't go to church a whole lot because we were Quaker, and he didn't particularly get along with the Quakers. We moved out to a farm when I was about 5 or 6 years old, and at that point my dad really realized that he needed Christ, and so we started going to the Christian church, and we continued to go to the Christian church. I continue to go to a Christian church. Well, I'm still going to a Christian church. When I was in the 3rd grade, was when I really realized that I had sinned. And all the way growing up, I mean, I was always read the Bible, and I always believed in Jesus, and I always believed in God, and I believed that they were very real to me. It wasn't like it dawned on me one day that there really was a God. When I was in the 3rd grade, though, I'd always been told that, when we sinned, we separated ourselves from God, and I really experienced that. I mean, I really felt separated from God. And that was when I was baptized. And from that point on, I mean, it's real funny because that Sunday I was baptized, and that Sunday afternoon, my cousin took me out behind the barn and punched me in the face until I cussed, so that I would go to hell when I died, because he believed that if you sinned after you were baptized, you wouldn't be forgiven anymore. So, in that way of thinking, I was saved for about 3 hours. And the thing that I've realized, because growing up is pretty hard work, and I just made a lot of really bad choices. I made a lot of, I would like to call them mistakes, but they were so deliberate it would be hard to say that they were mistakes. And the thing that I have really realized is my salvation really has very little to do with choices I've made. That even though when I entered into a covenant with God, he remained faithful to that covenant whether I was or not. And so my testimony would be just that God is faithful, and that he will go to any lengths to draw us to himself. And so that's kind of long and short of it. I haven't always lived an exemplary life, but God has always loved me.
So,
Were you going to tell us yours?
oh, mine? You stole my line, but
This way I went first.
I've never tried to work out a testimony kind of thing. I mean, I kind of believe that salvation is a process, that I'm being saved every day, and it's really cool for me to believe that there is a God in heaven that loves me and forgives me. And I kind of look at every day as a walk toward a home that I don't really know where it is, and I keep getting a little instruction here, a little instruction there. God keeps calling me, and one day I'm feeling I'll still be out in the middle of the woods somewhere, and he'll come and take me home. Not because I was a good walker or anything, but because of who God is. That would be for off the cuff. That's my testimony. Ask me tomorrow, I'll have something different.
Have you ever done this similar thing in a prison? If not, would you consider doing that?
Gay? She asked if we've ever done this seminar in a prison and if we would consider doing that. And we're only allowed to respond when we're asked about any kind of thing that has to do with an engagement. You have to talk to our manager, and she happens to be here, so we immediately in unison said gay, and that's not a homosexual reference. That's to That's our booking agent, manager, and friends. That's her first name.
A couple years ago, we were on tour, and this guy, we're all sitting in there eating. It's mostly guys. There were about 3 girls with us. Anyway, this guy came in and went, "Okay, who in here is gay?" We wouldn't say even if we were. Here's another hand over here. What? Yes.
Radio station told me that you've had a lot of women ask you to marry them, and would you relate some more humorous stories about that?
I didn't get the last part of that.
Would you tell us some of those funny stories?
Some of them are more tragic than funny. I mean, this is the really heartbreaking thing, is I kind of, there are a couple of heartbreaking things about it. Number one, most women who get to know me do not want to marry me.
It's tragic.
That's the tragic part. But people listen to, people think that I am what I sound like on an album. Well, there's a lot of production on that album, and a lot of that's very deliberate. My life does not play out like my albums do. It's even worse than my music. And so what you hear when I put out an album, and like a lot of people have, we put a love song on one of the albums just because my producer decided to do it. He really liked it. And it didn't bother me to do that, but a lot of people have said, well, why haven't you ever done that before? And I kind of go, well, because for a couple reasons. One, I don't write that many love songs because I don't have a lot of occasion to do that. The other is, when you put out an album, you're assuming that people are going to listen to it, and you want to say things that are relevant to your listeners. So music that I write that is intensely personal and really is kind of my own business kind of music. There's some of it that I just kind of go, boy, nobody would really, this is not anybody's business. This is my own personal therapy going on here. There's no reason to burden listeners with that. So people hear those albums and they think that that's the sum total of who I am and what I'm about. And I kind of go, wow, these albums don't address some of the real central issues of my life. And I have some real hang-ups. And I think in some ways I'm real easy to get along with, and in other ways I'm not very easy to get along with. So I think people have the illusion, when you're a musician, they have the illusion that they know you real intimately and real well, and the truth is, you know what I have chosen for you to know. And I've shown you my absolute best side. The other tragic thing to me is just that it's a sad thing when we live in a world where we fall in love with people that we haven't met because we can't find anyone among the people that we've met that we're in love with. And I kind of go, it's so easy. I think some of us are so hung up about love that a fantasy kind of love, a love that we imagine, is more appealing than a real love. There's a real kind of flesh and blood beating it out of each other kind of love. And I think that's unfortunate. It's also always scary when people tell me that the Lord has told me that I'm supposed to marry them. Because I kind of go, wow, who is this Lord that you're talking to? Because I'm hoping I'm talking to the right one, and he hasn't told me the same thing. And just as a side on that whole God told me this kind of issue, but I'll tell you folks, that's really dangerous stuff. And I believe that God speaks to us, and I believe that if we are willing to listen, and sometimes even when we're not willing to listen, that God speaks to us. But I think it's always dangerous to take what other people say that God has told them about you too seriously. When someone comes to you and says, I have a word for you from the Lord, my recommendation is that you listen, because who knows who God is going to speak through. Listen carefully, but you go back to your scriptures and you go to the elders of your church and make sure that before you follow them too carefully or take them too seriously, make sure that it lines up with a real spiritual authority, because there's a lot of spiritual deception going on. And a lot of the people who are saying that are really good intended people. But what happens is they have a sensation, they have a feeling, and they confuse that for God. And I hope that I hope they don't confuse feelings for God in every area of their lives, because that could be real devastating. There was someone else over here. Yes?
A couple years ago, I went to one of your final concerts.
Which one?
It was the one
like, anyway, you said that you were going back to school to finish your degree and you were going into the mission field. And I was thinking, is that what you've been doing, and what mission field are you interested in?
Yes, I have. Next semester I'll be student teaching. So I've got all of it done, except I have one semester of freshman classes that I have to take that in my many years of college experience I've never bothered with. Things like introduction to English and that sort of thing. So those plans are coming along. They're not as clear to me as they once were. I'm still, I'm pretty wide open. Yes?
Do you still want to teach at a Bureau of Indian Affairs school like you talked about?
Probably not a Bureau of Indian Affairs school. I'm still really interested in working with Indian people somewhere, but probably not through a Bureau of Indian Affairs school. That's a government-run thing, and I think everything the government touches turns to, you know. And I want to keep their hands off of me as much as possible. Yes? Compassion? Do we have any compassion sponsors here? Oh, we have quite a few. You know, one of the, I never intended to be a musician when I started out. I originally went to Bible college because when I graduated from high school, and part of my testimony, I suppose, would be this, that I realized at that point that if I didn't really get serious about my faith, I wasn't going to have any faith left to get serious about. So I thought at the time that the way to get serious about it was to go to Bible college. I'm not sure that if you're serious about your faith that the way that you live that out is by going to Bible college. I'm not sure that that's any kind of a special thing. But I went to Bible college and became a youth minister, and I really enjoyed the youth ministry. And just by a series of events that I pretty much didn't have a lot of control over, got involved in the music industry. And before I really realized what I was being sucked into, I was there. I'm one of the really weirdos that had success before I had a career. And I can't say that it's been a miserable career. I've actually had a wonderful time. It's been a great way to postpone growing up. But once again, when I come down to, I realized in high school that people really mattered. People were really important, and I really wanted to do something with my life where I helped somebody. And I think as a Christian musician, that it's been a wonderful opportunity to talk to a lot of people in a vague and general kind of way. What was your question? Yes. Of all the good things that have happened because of this career, one of the frustrations that I have with it is I find that I'm not sure where I'm at in terms of the Christian music industry and in terms of the way that mainline Christian people, the importance that they place on music and stuff. But I am convinced of this, that one of the greatest blessings that have been given to me by my involvement in an industry that I'm thankful to have been involved in. It's not that I resent, what has happened. It's been wonderful. But part of what has made it really wonderful is that we've been compassion representatives now for
3 years.
How long, Gay? 4? 4 years? For 4 years. Before that, I was a compassion. I sponsored a child. And it's really gratifying for me to know that there's a child today who has had a meal every day because of $25 that I gave up a month, which is a pretty small amount. I hope this doesn't sound like bragging, but how many people have signed up to our concerts and tapes and stuff? Over 1,500 people are now sponsors as a result of our efforts at being compassionate representatives. So I kind of go, when I get really frustrated with music and with the business end of it, I kind of go, you know what? No matter what I'm frustrated about, there are 1,500 kids that have a meal every day and that have a shot at an education and who are being introduced to Christ. And I'm very thankful for that. I can't think of anything else that has happened as a result of a music career that compares to that. And then I kind of go, someone said, how do you how would you talk someone into being a compassion sponsor? And it always shocks me that people think in those terms, because I kind of go, having been a compassion sponsor, I can't imagine anyone being able to talk me out of it. There's nothing that I could possibly spend $25 on that is worth a child. And there's nothing I've ever bought for $25 that brought me the joy that I have from being a part of some child that lives in a very hostile world, really experiencing the very practical love of God. So for those of you, I always have kind of mixed feelings, because I do believe that our commitment must be to our local congregation. That and I generally would not encourage people to support a lot of things outside of that, because there is so much misuse of money, and I think your local congregation is really the place for you to immediately plug into. But if you have 25 extra bucks a month, before I became a compassion sponsor, I really wanted to be sure that the money was getting to the kids. And they gave me some statistics that at first look were a little disappointing, because the year that I was doing it, and it varies from year to year, it has varied everywhere from 81% to about 92% of the money actually gets to the child, which I didn't think was that good until I looked at some other statistics in other organizations and found out that in some organizations as little as 10% of the money that you send actually gets to the child. So just in terms of administrative costs and all that kind of thing, when you think, gee, that only eats up 15% of it, that's really, most of your money is actually reaching not only that child, but what happens, we just got back from Colombia, and what I've seen in other compassion things that I visited is not only does the child that you're sponsoring benefit from the programs that they're sponsored into, but there are kids who are on waiting lists. The compassion goes ahead and helps before they get an actual sponsor. And the reason they can help those is because your child is in that program. Does that make sense? So that money actually goes beyond the kid that you're reaching. First time I went to Guatemala with the compassion thing. And compassion, this is another thing that I really appreciate about them, is they've asked me to represent them. And in order for me to do that well, they feel like I need to actually see what's happening, be out on the field and see where the money really is going. So they've taken me on a couple trips just so that I can feel good and go, yes, I know this money is getting somewhere and that lives are being changed. The first trip that we went on, one of the things that was, it's both the greatest joy and the deepest grief I think I've ever felt. I met this lady who had 2 children that were compassion-sponsored children. And when we met her, she just was in tears talking to us because her husband had left. They hadn't heard from him for years and years and years. She had, I think, 5 children at the time. 1 child died, or 2 children died, and a couple months before we had gotten there, this lady works. She makes tortillas, and she works from about 4 o'clock in the morning till about 8 o'clock at night. So she really doesn't have a lot of time to be a mother. But she had an infant child with her at the place where she worked. The child was sitting just outside the door where she was working. She wasn't actually in a actual building, but there was like a corner, and the child was sitting just around the corner. And when she went out to get it, it was gone. It had been stolen. And this is not uncommon in these countries. And for her, the thing that was so impressive to her was that she had prayed for God to save her other children. And compassion was actually an answer to her prayers. And you just don't have that kind of joy very often. You don't very often get to be a part of someone's prayers being answered. So it really is a wonderful, wonderful experience for those of you who have not participated. And for those of you who have, I just really want to, I know Gay, because Gay was with us in Colombia, Beaker could tell you, the people that you meet whose kids are being sponsored, I think that it has done as much to strengthen their faith as it has helped their kids. I think it just has a huge, huge impact everywhere where it is. It's a wonderful thing to be a part of.
Question back there.
That was, we had just left, I don't know if you've ever been to Amsterdam, but it's a Midwestern boy's dream, boy. It's like every sin in the world is right there, really available, nobody knows you. And Beaker and I were talking about this in Germany, and I think this is funny. We're sitting in a train station in Germany and having this like really intimate, really serious discussion about that you think when you're a kid and you're struggling with sins and you go, you know what, by the time I'm 30, I'm going to be so old and tired I won't have energy enough to sin anymore. And I will be so gloomy and so dull that sin will no longer have any appeal. I won't even enjoy being tempted. The thing that I find shocking about myself is that even if I don't act on sin, I still like temptation. You know, and you know how we're supposed to pray, lead us not into temptation. My prayers generally lead me just into temptation a little and then get me out right at the last minute. Because temptation is very
tempting.
Tempting, yeah. And we like, even if we're not going to act on it. I mean, why else would we walk around malls if we didn't like to be tempted to covet? It just wouldn't make any sense. And we're having this really intimate conversation about some rather embarrassing things. Not between us, because we pretty much know each other inside out, but we're in Germany, and I was assuming that no one would be interested. I wasn't thinking about anybody else being around. And there's another guy sitting on the bench, and right in the middle of the conversation, right after I had said the most incriminating thing I think I could ever say about myself, this guy leans over and says, excuse me, but are you Rich Mullins? You know, so immediately I'm going over the conversation to see if I am or not. But I decided, you know what, I would like for everyone to think that I was really Mr. Spiritual Heavy, but the reality of it is I'm not. And for me, this is even better news than if I was, because I kind of go, you know what, if God can save me, he can save you. There's no problem. And I kind of go, and for those people who are upset because they find out what I'm really like and who I really am, if you think I'm bad now, you should imagine what I would be if I wasn't a Christian. So I think the good news of the grace of God is far more significant than my own personal, pious victories. So that's where that came from. Was in fact, I wrote a couple of the verses in Amsterdam before we left, just walking around trying to find some kind of clarity, trying to get a grip. Yes. My favorite song on my own is Elijah. And I really don't, that was a real easy song to, and Beaker and I talked about this once. When we wrote Growing Young, it started out with music that you had written. And a lot of times we just play the music over and over and over again, and then you mumble nonsense syllables and life. And you go, okay, what can we put with life? You kind of build it almost word by word. Well, Growing Young, we wrote that in probably 20 minutes. It just kind of hit, and it was there. And we were talking about that because writing really is hard work, and most of your work people don't see because you throw most of it away because it's humiliating when you go back and you read what you have struggled over for weeks. You just go, wow, any 3-year-old could come up with this, and only they would do it much better. And but Elijah was that way. It was a song that I don't remember writing it. I remember playing the piano, and I remember singing it, and I don't remember going, okay, now what rhymes with Elijah? It just kind of, whew. So that's one reason I like it, because I'm really lazy. I hate it when I have to work on a song.
And taught you to play it. I've never known anybody else that.
I was introduced to the lap dulcimer because my dad is Appalachian, and it was a part of my attempt to get over my being embarrassed about hillbillyism. I went, you know what, if I'm going to honor my father, I probably need to try to understand the culture that he came out of. And for me, because I responding to music, a lot of trying to understand Appalachian culture was just listening to the hillbilly music. And that's where I ran into the lap dulcimer. And then I went to a dulcimer festival with a friend of mine, and that was where I first heard the hammer dulcimer. And, you know, when I heard it, I immediately knew I was going to get one somehow, someday. And it was probably about 5 years later before I ever got one. But that's kind of how that came about. Yes?
How did you meet Brennan Manning?
Beaker introduced me to Brennan Manning. You know, we pretty much keep silence when we travel. And sometimes, though, one or the other of us would have just would really want to hear a tape. And so we don't have any real strict rules.